So today, we're diving into the story of Charlie Kirk. This is a guy who came out of the Chicago suburbs to become one of the most powerful and, yeah, one of the most polarizing voices in the whole MAGA movement. His story is just this whirlwind of activism, massive influence, and a ton of controversy. Honestly, it kind of mirrors the deep divisions we see in American politics itself. So let's get into how he built this whole thing.
Okay, to really get a feel for Charlie Kirk's impact, you have to picture the scene he created literally hundreds of times, a college auditorium just jammed with thousands of students. For years, these campus tours were the absolute centerpiece of his organization. We're talking highly produced, supercharged, and often really contentious events, all designed to bring his conservative message straight to the next generation.
And at the heart of it all were these really provocative moments, just like this one. During a debate, a student asked him about mass shooter statistics in the US. And Kirk's response, counting or not counting gang violence? Well, that right there is a perfect snapshot of his confrontational style. It's the kind of thing that fired up his supporters and at the same time totally outraged his critics. How he developed that style and the movement he built takes us all the way back to the beginning. So to really understand the political firebrand, we've got to rewind. Who was Charlie Kirk before he was, Charlie Kirk? And how did this whole thing even get started? Kirk's political side showed up pretty early. In high school, he was already campaigning against a price hike on cookies. But he really broke through when he wrote an essay for Breitbart, claiming there was liberal bias in his textbooks. That piece actually got him on Fox Business. And then, after getting rejected from West Point, he did just one semester of community college before deciding, you know what, the classroom isn't for me. My future is in full-time politics. And his rise was incredibly fast. I mean, think about it. In 2010, he's just a high school kid volunteering for a Senate campaign. Just 2 years later, after that West Point rejection, he has this game-changing meeting with a donor named Bill Montgomery. And together, they co-found Turning Point USA. The guy was just 18 years old, and he was already launching a national organization meant to take on groups like MoveOn.org. And that little operation that started in his parents' garage? Yeah, I didn't stay there for long. Kirk turned out to be a master fundraiser, and he quickly transformed Turning Point USA into a hugely influential, multi-million-dollar political machine. Just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, by 2020, Turning Point USA's annual revenue had exploded to over $39 million, all backed by some really big-name megadonors. And Kirk's personal success? Well, it grew right alongside the organization's. His own salary from his network of nonprofits jumped from just $27,000 a year to over $400,000 by 2021. And the growth just kept accelerating. By 2022, contributions had more than doubled to a staggering $79 million. That really cemented Turning Point status as an absolute powerhouse in conservative fundraising. So what did they do with all that influence? Well, they launched controversial projects like the Professor Watch List, which a lot of critics said was basically meant to intimidate educators. They organized these huge youth rallies that felt more like rock concerts. They bought the Students for Trump brand to lock in their political alignment, and they even started Turning Point Faith to mobilize church communities. And as the organization's influence just got bigger and bigger, Kirk's own message started to get a lot sharper, and it began courting more and more controversy, really pushing the ideological boundaries. A really big shift in Kirk's ideology was his full-on embrace of what's known as Christian nationalism. He started out more secular, but he later began to argue that for liberty to even exist, America needed a Christian government and a Christian population. And that view became totally central to his whole platform. And you can see this change so clearly when you put his own words side by side. In 2018, he's on the record saying we should support the separation of church and state. But by 2024, his view had done a complete 180, claiming that American liberty was literally impossible without a Christian population. Kirk also became a really fierce critic of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, or DEI. In January 2024, he said this about Black pilots while blaming DEI for problems in the airline industry. As you can probably guess, that quote sparked a massive backlash, with widespread accusations of racism. And his criticism just escalated from there, all the way to attacking foundational legislation. He started calling the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 a huge mistake. He argued that it had become, in his own words, an anti-white weapon, a position that really put him on the far-right fringe of the conservative movement.
His activism also put him right in the middle of the events of January 6th. The source material shows his organization sent busloads of supporters to the rally that happened right before the attack on the Capitol. And when he was later called to testify before Congress about it, he refused to answer questions, pleading the Fifth Amendment.
So, when you put it all together, this meteoric rise, the massive fundraising, the really polarizing rhetoric, you're left with a legacy that is, to say the least, fiercely contested. How Charlie Kirk is remembered really truly depends on who you ask.
For his huge number of supporters, he was a hero, a guy who energized a whole new generation of conservatives and gave a powerful voice to the Christian right. But for his critics, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, his rhetoric was seen as dangerously divisive, racist, and xenophobic. There's really no middle ground here.
And that deep support from his allies, well, it gave him some seriously incredible access and influence. I mean, we're talking the highest levels of power. He became a trusted advisor in the Trump administration, a frequent guest down at Mar-a-Lago, and a headline speaker at all the biggest conservative conferences. He really solidified his place as a central figure in the modern right-wing movement. Ultimately, the story of Charlie Kirk is one of rapid ascent, massive influence, and deep, deep division. His career really serves as a mirror for our own times, and it leaves us with a pretty critical question. How does the story of just one activist end up reflecting the larger, more fractured story of political polarization in America today?